So I'm delighted to introduce Danny Massey. Danny has a long history of advocacy for worker issues. He worked at Berlin Rosen, a national firm that does communications focused on advocacy for worker issues. He was the central person in the Fight for 15 campaign. That's $15 an hour. And he's worked on a variety of issue campaigns which would bring greater wealth to workers. He's now moved into a new era of dealing with the organization, the new nonprofit, expanding ESOPs. So it's our pleasure to have Danny here to talk about what he's going to be doing. Thank you, Danny.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the Institute for the Study of Employee Ownership and Profit Sharing at Rutgers and the Aspen Institute Economic Opportunities Program for including me in this inspiring forum. Sorry to have to follow that fantastic worker owner panel. I'm thrilled to be here and very excited to be the first hire of expanding ESOPs, a new national coalition of 80 organizations and counting, bringing together a broad cross-section of the ESOP community that seeks to imagine and make possible a world in which every worker shares ownership in their company. I come to employee ownership advocacy, as Joe mentioned, for more than a dozen years supporting worker organizing campaigns, most notably the Fight for 15. When 200 New York City fast food workers walked off their jobs in 2012 demanding $15 an hour in a union, nobody gave them a shot. But they stuck together and inspired tens of thousands across the country to join them, ultimately winning $200 billion in raises, including $15 minimum wage laws that cover nearly half the nation's workforce, and $15 floors for mega companies like Target, Disney, Amazon, and more. The movement, quote, entirely changed the politics of the country, according to MSNBC's Chris Hayes. So if anyone laughs at the idea that every worker can become an owner of their company, I say go talk to Alvin Major, who breaded chicken, mixed coleslaw, and baked biscuits for 80 hours a week at 3 KFCs for $7.25 an hour without any overtime pay. Perpetually exhausted, Alvin often fell asleep on the bus home and missed his stop, walking long distances in the middle of the night because he couldn't afford another fare. He had 2 kids and was just happy to be able to support them by working all those hours. But when he joined with other fast food workers across the city demanding $15 in a union, everything changed. A little more than a decade after walking out on his first strike, his salary has nearly tripled. Alvin will tell you nothing is impossible. I'm only a few months into the employee ownership world, but easily my favorite thing has been speaking with employee owners around the country. I'd like to share 2 stories on the power of employee ownership that have touched me. For the first, I'll take you back to a Walmart parking lot in Columbia, South Carolina, 13 years ago. In that parking lot, every morning you'll find Keith Dixon, a 20-year-old kid parked in his Toyota Yaris hatchback trying to get some sleep before his next shift as a cashier paid minimum wage at a candy store. Keith was homeless and didn't see any way out of that parking lot until he landed a job separating scrap metal at a local manufacturing plant, and everything changed. From day one, Keith sensed something unusual about the company, AMBAC International, which makes fuel injection systems for heavy-duty commercial and military use. Folks were way more interested in a 20-year-old kid with no professional skill set than he ever would have imagined. Even though he was a temp separating scrap metal, they took time to take him on the shop floor and show him the ropes. Keith worked hard, got hired full-time. He quickly realized the reason everyone was so invested in him was because they owned the company. From the minute he walked in the door, they saw the connection between his work and their wallets. He was trained to have a big picture view of the company and how it operates and learned how all the details of everyone's job intertwined. It was drilled into him that everyone is as strong as everyone else, from the scrap metal sorter to the CEO. His previous experience handling finances was limited to the cash register in the candy store, but Keith got a comprehensive financial training sitting with a more tenured employee to learn what each line of the P&L meant and how the daily duties of each employee affected those numbers. AMBAC's investment in Keith paid off big time. As he learned about the business, he took on more and more responsibility. 13 years removed from that Walmart parking lot, Keith now manages the supply chain for the entire company. He has enough put away in his ESOP account to feel secure about his retirement, something he never would have imagined before AMBAC. And he's become an advocate for employee ownership, speaking with Department of Labor officials about how it changed his life and teaching the value of the ESOP to new hires. Then there's Kevin Sims, who was working odd jobs after being laid off from a moving company where he'd worked for 14 years in Denton, Texas. He was constantly worried about how to pay his bills and didn't know where his next paycheck was coming from. I was always running. Oh my God, he told me. In his 40s with a son and worried constantly about his future and his kids, Kevin landed a job at, guess where, 100% employee-owned Web Industries, which seems to be the star of the day here, in his hometown of Denton. It changed his life. This is from him directly. I was taught to think like an owner, to speak up if I saw ways to do things more importantly. I was really intrigued by that. I know I'm important, but it made me feel really important, like I was worth more, like I had a stake in something. I came in every day knowing I have a voice that can make change. If the company's losing money, I'm losing money. What can I do to help us? And that's the way everyone thinks. Kevin's proudest moment is manufacturing engine blanket 1361, which blasted off into space. When he thinks of it, he gets emotional and grateful for how far he's come. Employee ownership took him from unemployed and barely scraping by to producing a blanket that made it to outer space. We desperately need more Kevin Simses and Keith Dixons, and we need them now. Our economy is at a tipping point. Voters across the nation in red, blue, and purple states sent a clear message in November. The economy isn't working. It's the most urgent issue in Americans' lives, and people want their elected leaders to do more. Yes, it's the price of eggs, but Americans' pain and discontent run so much deeper. Nearly 60% of Americans can't afford a $2,000 emergency. The share of wealth held by families in the top 10% is 69%, while the share held by families in the bottom 50% is only 3%. We heard this morning the bottom 50% of households hold only about 1% of the country's equities. Most have nothing or next to nothing saved in retirement accounts. Over the past 3 decades, equity gains have far outpaced gains in real estate or real wages. This trend is accelerating. Without access to equity ownership, most of our fellow citizens are going to fall further behind. And since Black and Latino families are much less likely than white families to own stock, they're at risk of falling even further back. In 2022, for example, 2/3 of white families own stocks, compared with 39% of Black families, according to the Federal Reserve. The median value of total stock holdings among white families that year was $67,800, more than 4 times the amount for Black families. It's no wonder fewer than half of Americans born after 1965 expect a better life than their parents' generation. It isn't just workers who are hurting. Lack of wealth at the bottom hurts consumption levels, as those at the bottom spend much higher rates than those at the top. High quit rates, recently peaking at 40%, cause significant and unnecessary friction in the economy, while 70% of Americans are disengaged on the job, costing $2 trillion in annual lost corporate productivity. A recent report from Gallup found overall job satisfaction across America matched a record low, and employees are seeking new jobs at the highest rate since 2015. Workers have grown so frustrated by their jobs that Gallup has given this moment a name: the Great Detachment. We can and must do so much better. What if with a few simple policy changes, which just happen to be wildly popular with voters across party lines, we could build worker wealth and stronger companies? By expanding employee stock ownership plans, we can do just that. ESOPs put appreciating hands in the hands of workers, with equity returns compounding over years to generate meaningful retirement wealth. Worker ownership results in greater worker retention rates for companies, and ownership combined with worker voice initiatives results in greater levels of engagement. A recent article in Barron's about how Publix, which is the country's largest ESOP, is massively outperforming its larger supermarket competitors like Kroger and Target, attributed the company's success to its employee ownership culture. Quote, being employee-owned is a huge advantage for Publix, a retail consultant told Barron's. People would rather work for Publix. It gets better quality employees. Shared ownership means giving every employee a real economic stake in their company's long-term success. This aligns everyone's interests, motivates everyone to do their best work, and lets everyone share in the rewards when their company prospers. ESOPs are an incredible wealth creation tool. $892 billion of wealth created in the last 10 years alone. But we simply don't have enough of them. Only 250 new ESOPs are formed each year, about 1% of the 25,000 companies that are bought and sold. The vast majority of new ESOPs have fewer than 100 employees. About 3/4 of new ESOPs are in the industrial and service industries, so we're missing huge swaths of the economy, like technology, financial services, and media. Expanding ESOPs and our coalition of scores of leading trustees, advisors, investment banks, academic institutions, foundations, and advocacy groups believe that while ESOP structures work well for very small companies, there are notable challenges in achieving similar success with scaled companies and more highly valued businesses. There are many reasons for this, including statutory and regulatory complexity, insufficient corporate tax incentives, tax benefits to sellers that are largely limited to small businesses, and excessive litigation risk associated with forming a new ESOP. These hurdles have constrained new ESOP formation in terms of the number of ESOPs, the size of ESOPs, the sector diversity of ESOPs. The law governing ESOPs was written 50 years ago, and to break the stagnation, we need to modernize the ESOP legislation and regulatory framework and bring it in line with the way the economy functions today. Imagine if instead of hundreds of ESOPs formed each year, we have thousands. Imagine further if workers own 10% of every company in the country through an ESOP. There's a massive and untapped opportunity to dramatically expand the number of ESOPs formed each year, particularly among larger companies and in sectors of the economy where we currently see little ESOP activity. The results would change our country. With all corporate equities estimated at $75 trillion, we'd be talking about $7.5 trillion of wealth creation potential for working Americans. And even if we're only successful with partial adoption, the impact would be enormous. It would strengthen companies and lift up workers. It would create an economy that is truly inclusive and sustainable. We can't afford to wait. And fortunately, it's not something we have to wait for. Even in these divided political times, everyone can agree that if you work hard, you should have a shot to get ahead. ESOPs are a unicorn of an issue that unites and excites people right and left. Ronald Reagan loved them, so does Bernie Sanders. Our polling shows expanding broad-based employee ownership is wildly popular across party lines, and that voters will support politicians who act to create more opportunities for broad-based employee ownership. Just imagine, how different would our economy and our country be if workers owned a piece of every company in America? How different would it be if Keith Dixon's and Kevin Sims's stories were the norm and not the exception? It's time we stop imagining and find out. Thank you.